on the elements paper that was circulated among the member states on the 10th of June, giving delegations 2 working days to respond. India fully aligns with the statements delivered by the PR of SVG on behalf of L69 and the PR of Japan on behalf of G4. In addition, I'd like to deliver the following in my national capacity. India has taken note that the elements paper is an assessment of the co-chairs. This implies that the characterization of IGN dynamics in general and the 5 clusters in particular in the document is a reflection of the understanding and views of the co-chairs. In our view, it neither captures the overall state of play accurately nor accounts for the overwhelming sentiments of a majority of member states, not unlike similar elements papers of the last 2 years at least. I'd like to make the following points against this backdrop. First, it's not clear what constitutes convergences and divergences. It's our understanding that a convergence is not the same as unanimity. If so, a convergence could operationally be considered as a majority view. However, the working principle in the elements paper regarding convergences and divergences are different and ambiguous and subjective understanding and views of the co-chairs. Second, UNG decision 62/557 clearly stipulates that the purpose behind the IGN is to garner a solution with the widest possible political acceptance based on proposals by member states. This foundational document of the IGN does not mention about or allude to bridging proposals. It has also been the firm established practice in the UN for the co-chairs or co-facs to propose bridging proposals after floating a text as part of text-based negotiations and not before. It would also be contextual to highlight that the elements paper treats a reform of the Security Council as a member states-driven process. Therefore, proposals under the consideration of the IGN co-chairs must be based on models presented by member states and groups thus far and not subjective understandings. Third, the elements paper mentions that the permanent category would be expanded through the fixed regional seats proposal, which incredibly has only been documented in this elements paper. It further adds that member states elected to such seats would serve in their national capacity and not formally represent their respective regions. These present 3 inherent issues. 1, the proposal in no way expands a permanent category. 2, the concept of regionality would not be served if the concerned member states act in their national capacities. And 3, it weakens the case of SIDS, a cross-regional group which India has been consistently supportive of. Further, this whole proposal is akin to granting a veto to the E10, bereft of convoluted arguments of permanency. This proposal confuses veto power with permanency. Fourth, the elements paper proposes further discussion and clarification on the concept of permanency. The UN Charter is very clear on this question and there is no room for ambiguity. Article 23 clearly categorizes the UNSC members into 2, permanent and non-permanent. Therefore, the definition of a permanent seat needs no further elaboration of classification as a divergence. Groups and member states, including the African group, the G4 and L69, treat a permanent member, serving or future, strictly in accordance with the provisions of the Charter. Further, on convergences under regional representation, there is no mention of the broad support for improving the representation of African group in the UN Security Council. The IGN meeting that focused on presentation of the African model had made the supportive views of all key stakeholders known. Fifth, as also highlighted in the past, support of a majority for expansion in the permanent category has been reduced to a significant number of delegations in the elements paper. Despite the categorical position of a majority of member states in favor of expanding the permanent category, as reflected either in the national statements delivered at the IGN or through association with groups such as L69, G4, CARICOM, etc., this has not been depicted accurately. Sixth, reflecting expansion of the category of 2-year term non-permanent category as a convergence portrays only a part of the picture. Groups and member states add qualifiers and attach other interlinked parameters as they endorse expansion in the non-permanent category. UNSC reform would be grossly inadequate, bordering on failure if expansion is limited only to the non-permanent category, as it would fundamentally not change the decision-making power structure of the P5. Groups and member states have waited this long for real and meaningful reforms. Seventh, a nothing is agreed until everything is agreed approach must not become a tool to block progress. Status quos have tried to use this argument in their favor and thereby entrench the existing inequities in the Security Council. Eighth, the General Assembly is a truly democratic principal organ of the UN. However, the Security Council is fundamentally different by its very design. By advocating expansion of the permanent category, India's consistent effort has been to bring in a greater sense of balance and equity in the Security Council and change the decision-making parameters of the P5, while being mindful that the principle of sovereign equality of states would not be applicable in its entirety, unlike the UNGA, due to such foundational DNA enshrined in the Charter. Finally, IGN cannot be fundamentally different from other UN processes, wherein negotiations are held on the basis of a text. Groups and member states express their views on the text under consideration. Therefore, we urge the co-chairs to take the lead on formulating a text with clearly defined milestones and timelines so that groups and member states could engage in a purposeful and outcome-oriented manner and thereafter consider, if necessary and as appropriate, any bridging proposal. In closing, it is India's sincere hope that the co-chairs would suitably take into account our views and amend the elements paper suitably in order to make it more objective. India would also like to reiterate that we will continue to support all earnest efforts by the co-chairs and other groups and member states towards achieving real reforms of the UN Security Council. Shukran jazilan.